Okay, so we had the breaking news the other day that is going to be an election within the UK. But more importantly than the election for government, we have the Propertymark elections coming up very, very shortly. And I've been joined today by the one and only, the Queen of Cornwall herself, Sophie Lang. Thanks for making time today to join me.
Thank you very much for having me, lovely. And yes, there is an election coming, but I won't be standing out in the rain to get
I mean,
votes.
why not have an umbrella? I know it's cool to be a politician and stand out in the rain these days and be like, I'm so hard I can stand in the rain, but just get an umbrella, honestly, you're
I
wearing
know.
a suit. So, right, well, that aside, small bit of politics aside, so you are running for the Property Mark Vice Presidency, I hear.
Yes, I am vice president for the Arla side of Propertymark, so that's the lettings division.
Okay, and you're currently a regional executive, which, so talk us through what a regional executive, first of all, because I am probably the best person to interview because I have very little clue about what goes on in Property Mark. What I do know about Property Mark is once you're in, it's like Alcatraz, like you're never getting out. Everyone's like, once you're in Property Mark, everyone loves Property Mark. They will like invite their friends to join Property Mark. It's like a proper gang sort of thing. So I'm on the outside currently, so I'm probably a very good person to ask you questions on this. So you're a regional executive. What on earth does that go to every day?
So I've been a regional executive covering Cornwall for the last 4 years. So I applied for the job as I'd been a Propertymark member for a few years. Regional executives, we're basically we are the connection between the members and board and Propertymark organisation. So we're the people that feed back. We have monthly meetings where we talk about what's going on in the ground. So we're the working agents that tell the people at Propertymark what's going on, what's everyone saying, what needs to be focused on, what lobbying needs to be done, and what the members are worrying about. So we're kind of that connection between to the head office.
Got it. So you're like the buffer between the two, effectively.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, you're those people that kind of die down the feedback. People are like, "This is terrible," and you're like, "Well, they've got some constructive feedback about X, Y, and Z."
We
They
do.
def
We're really good at filtering.
exactly. They definitely didn't use the F word.
No, no, definitely not. No, we like to filter. We kind of put it back in a more succinct way, maybe sometimes.
Okay, so you mentioned there you applied for the job. Now, call me old-fashioned, but I think most jobs pay some money. So I understand that you do not get paid for being a regional executive in any way, shape, or form. Is that correct?
Well, we do not get paid. However, we do get training. We do get a lot of opportunities with Propertymark to be part of the conversation. We get media opportunities because obviously we're the people on the ground. So there are other benefits to being an executive and being part of Propertymark that isn't just monetary.
Do you also get a certain amount of screen time with Phil Spencer?
If you're Toby Martin, yes.
Oh
But
yeah, totally. Of course, Toby. Yeah, rather red carpet for
obviously Toby
Toby.
does. Us mere mortals, not so much. But no, obviously at events he's there, etc., etc. But not always.
Old Phil, see him around everywhere. Good. Okay, so you're going from a non-paid job at the moment, being a regional executive, and you're looking
Yeah.
for a promotion to a further non-paid job as the vice president of Property Mark. Why on earth would you give yourself more work to do for nothing?
Well, again, it's not just for nothing. I promise, honestly. I mean, the when you're president, you get to go around the whole country and speak to members from everywhere, and not just like England. We're talking about other devolved nations, Ireland, Wales, and Scotland. And it's really interesting to go see those places because they are doing things we're not doing here yet, but quite possibly will be doing. So you kind of get to go and see what they're up to. It's also the experience of talking to the members and being head of quite a big body that has quite a lot of has contributed really positively to the lettings industry. And I just really want to be part of that because I've got a strong voice and I want to be able to vocalize what the members want and what they want to hear from and how they want things to be steered in the conversations. And I just think being part of that, I'm really passionate about lettings. I always have been lettings for a very long time. I think I'd probably bleed it if I could. And that having that kind of platform to be more involved in that higher level stuff, like with Westminster and lobbying and a bit of involving politics and things like that, is just something I think you don't get a lot of opportunity to be part of that very often.
And do you feel like you're going to come into quite a what's what I'm looking for, turbulent time, should we
That
say,
is
in the
the
rental
nice way of
market?
saying it. I think someone would call it storm. We're about to come into, and obviously we already had rental reform on our doorstep, but now that isn't looking likely. As we film it, we don't know if it's going to go through wash up or not. So, we've all geared up for this big piece of legislation that was going to be the biggest thing to happen since the 80s, and now it might be scrapped and started again but then you've got to look at possibly if we get red in, that it's going to be very different again. So we're coming up for a lot of change. So actually to be involved in that and be part of the conversation is quite exciting.
Okay,
What do you
so
think?
I think we can be fairly confident it's going to be a Labour government going forward. I mean, obviously, this is going out in the future. This is going to go out on the 7th of next month. And when's the election? Okay, well, okay, there's plenty of time for me to be proved wrong. But I would say it's probably be fairly confident it's going to be a Labour government going forward. So, with that in mind, what's sort of your manifesto pledge, let's call it? So, why, if someone sat here thinking, oh, yeah, I like the sound of Sophie and she seems like she's got her head screwed on, what are your plans for the future for Propertymark where we should go, yeah, I'm definitely going to vote for Sophie?
I mean, with Propertymark, obviously, you're not at the high ups, but you do have an influential voice on how things should be steered because you can voice back what the members are saying. So for me, my main things I want to focus on is obviously we are about to reach massive change. Regardless of what happens, there's going to be change. And I think agents need a strong voice to help them guide them through that and also what's on the ground, because what politicians may deem as important isn't what us working day in, day out in the industry know is important. So we need to be able to voice that in a strong way and get our point across of why this needs to be focused on rather than other areas. Also for me, Propertymark, there's a lot of agents, although Propertymark has divisions of sales, lettings, auctions, commercial, there's divisions within divisions that aren't as represented by Propertymark because there's just no one who's put their head above the parapet, to say. So, for example, I'm a big supporter of HMO management. I've been doing it for years. And I think that HMO is a whole different ballgame to general residential lettings, and is something that needs a bit more support and help with changes coming up and more focus, whether that be more courses or even a qualification in HMO, because it is a completely different thing. And I think that at the moment there's a lot of bad press with landlords and agents. And if you look at that bad press, it is generally HMO related. So it's an area that we could make a real difference to bring up the standards. So yeah, so my pleasure really, I really want to be the voice of members through the change, support through the change, and also help the divisions within divisions that don't have as much of a voice at the moment.
That sounds very good. So paint me a picture. You get elected and they put the crown on you or the sash on you or whatever you get for being elected. You get your staff, is that what this currently called? And your day one at the job and you sit down at your same desk, because I'm presuming there isn't a desk that comes with the job either. So you sit down at your old desk and you're like, right, I'm now the vice president of Propertymark. What's the first thing you want to do?
Well, vice president, obviously, there is a 3-year lead into presidency. So you become vice president first for a year, then you are president elect for a year, and then you are president. So you don't really have as much influence until you get to the kind of presidential year. For example, Anne Harrod is coming in as president this year. She's been waiting in the wings for 2 years. But from vice presidency, it's just being a bit more voice. I think with at this moment, it's really important because we've got this change coming. A government change is always massive. A lot of people haven't worked through a government change. So that's going to be really interesting to see younger agents that haven't been in it as long to see what actually happens. And because the legislation is going to change one way or another, it just depends what it's going to look like. I think that from day one, it's really going to be guiding Propertymark on what agents are actually worried about, what landlords are actually worried about, because we talk to them every day, all day. So we can then focus their efforts into the areas that are important for us.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. So you mentioned it there and touched on it briefly. What are the main areas that landlords are worried about going forwards?
Currently, not a lot of landlords are worried about Section 21. That seems to be the big headline thing. Section 21's going. I mean, we've still got ways to evict tenants if Section 21's goes. We've got Section 8 and legitimate reasons to do so. One of the biggest ones for us is fixed terms going away. So in the current rental reform bill, which probably will be no more, is that fixed terms were going to be removed, which means we'd go back to assured tenancies, which are back 70s, 80s. We abolished those because landlords left in their droves. Because it has a real negative impact on the rental market. So it's that and keeping landlords in the market. At the moment, landlords are leaving, and then this is why we're seeing a shortage in property. We're seeing rental prices skyrocket to levels I've never seen, which is worrying because it's affordability for tenants as well. Not everyone wants to buy. There are people that want to buy, but there are people that don't want to because they have work that means they move around the country. They just don't want to settle. They just, so you know, the PRS is a really important part of our infrastructure, and we need to protect it.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a really hard question now. Let's assume you get the Prime Minister's job tomorrow. This is a drastic change in role, and you actually get a fairly decent pay rise with it as well, which is really good news. So you are Prime Minister, so you are Rishi Sunak #2 or Keir Starmer -1, however you want to do it. What do you do to stop landlords leaving the private rental sector?
I think tax changes have to be looked at. So the biggest, the tax changes that they made a few years ago has had quite a big impact on landlords. It's not as profitable. I mean, people don't like profits, quite a dirty word. But if you're a landlord, you're investing your money for a return. So it's not about being a greedy landlord, i.e., you know, there's this vision of landlords sat on a hill of money. Most landlords are barely scraping, they're not even making their current outgoings because of mortgage rates increasing. So we need to make it an investment, because that's what it is. So then landlords have the money to put it back into the property, to make it a good, decent home for tenants, to make it sure it's a long-term home for tenants. If landlords are leaving, they're evicting tenants who are becoming homeless. So we need to, I think the tax is probably one of the biggest changes that would make quite a big impact on the market at the moment. If we could repeal what they put in a few years ago, I think that would be a start.
So I can speak from personal experience here. So I rent out my first house I ever bought, and the tax wise on it. So obviously, because you used to be able to claim a percentage of your mortgage back, didn't you? As kind of
Yeah.
like, I've not really made £1,000 because I paid a lot of it in mortgage sort of thing. So I pay about £1,000 a month in mortgage. I get about £1,500 worth of income on a monthly basis. So you go, great, Chris is making £500 per month. Not really, because that rental income over the year, if you times £1,500 by 12 over the year, it brings in, I don't know, 15 grand, 20 grand, whatever the number is. My personal allowance, gone. That my personal allowance is completely gone on that rental property, and any money I bring in from my actual business that I pay myself, straight away my personal allowance is out the window because of that rental income.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we're seeing with landlords. And back, you know, when people wanted to invest, property is still the better yield if you're looking for property, but it is getting more and more difficult for landlords to break even. If a landlord's sitting there and it's not making them any money, then what's the point of having a rent? You may as well stick it in a bank. You've got increased insurances for landlords, increased premiums for landlords, you've got increased maintenance costs because obviously everything's going up. So yeah, I feel that that would make a big difference to a lot of landlords.
Okay, so day one is tax. Where do you sit on the side of things with regard to, how can I phrase this? I don't want to say kicking tenants out because that's probably a very harsh way of saying it. What about if you come to a natural end with your current tenants and you think to yourself, I want these guys to go on and get someone else in? Where does your mindset sit with regard to what the right way to go with those people is?
Yeah, I mean, landlords who are evicting tenants just because they want more money is not right. We saw a bit of an influx in Cornwall, especially after COVID, of landlords evicting tenants to go Airbnb and short-term lets because the income was a lot more and there wasn't the tax issues with. Obviously, luckily that's just changed with the recent budget. Um, but yeah, so we have seen it, and to me that's wrong. And I understand why the government have looked at Section 21 and call it a no-fault eviction. However, most of the evictions, all of the evictions I've done, apart from a few after COVID because of the short term let, have always had a reason, either antisocial behaviour, arrears, the landlord has to sell, the landlord has to move back in, circumstantial change, like life happens for landlords. You know, they can't be tied to an investment property forever because life does change. There's unexpected things that crop up. But I do agree that giving a tenant notice just to get more money or for a very frivolous reason is wrong, which is why losing Section 21 isn't necessarily a bad idea. It's just unfortunately we don't have the system in place with Section 8 and courts to be able to make it work as it currently stands.
Because my understanding is if you want to get a Section 8 notice in at the moment and your tenant, you actually want to get your tenant out, I mean, join the line. It's about 40 miles that way. We'll see you next Christmas sort of thing. So good luck with that.
It is a postcode lottery at the moment with courts. If you're in London or any of the really busier areas, the waiting list to see a judge is insane. We're luckier down in Cornwall, we're slightly quieter, so it's not as long. But still, and then again, even if you get your eviction notice and then need to get a bailiff, the bailiffs are just absolutely stacked. You can't get a bailiff. So the courts need to be reformed. But it's easier said than done trying to reform a very old established system. I do think there needs to be a dedicated housing court, but that costs money.
Right. And do you think it's a case that a lot of it is, I use this quite bravely, common sense over this stuff? You know, if a landlord's saying, I'm kicking you out because I want to put the rent up by 400 quid per month and you can't afford it, therefore, you know, pack your bags, mate, sort of thing. There's a difference between that conversation and someone who's trashed the house, hasn't paid the rent for the last 2 months and whatever it may be. So there's an element of common sense there, which you think that a judge would look at and go, yeah, you're a bit of a, you know what, in the property, or you're actually a really good tenant in the property and we can take a view on it. But obviously with the queues, the lines, the overbooking, whatever you want to call it, that just isn't a reality.
Yeah, and that's the problem we're going to find. They're talking about digitalizing, which again doesn't take individual circumstances into account. It will have to take a very generic view, which is very dangerous with that because everybody's circumstances are very different. Like you said, it could be because the landlord is trying to just evict them for no reason, which again doesn't happen often, but you know there has been instances. So yeah, it is a hard one. It's not an easy fix. I think the government has got their work cut out for them to make this a balanced system.
That's what they're out there, 2 moves ahead. Call a general election, not your problem then.
Exactly, very true.
Then you get to
Run
point the
away.
finger. You get to point the finger from the other side and said, "Oh, we teed it up for you. You should have done it by now. There's all these rental problems." It's like, well, you've made these problems, sort of thing. But no, not us. It's your
Well,
problem.
true, but
You're in
Labour
power.
have shot themselves in the foot a little bit by saying that they would do it within the first 100 days of government of getting rid of Section 21, which is slightly dangerous because the court system doesn't back it up. So I can see them backtracking on that one quite quickly.
Question here. You might not know the answer to this, and if you don't, that's absolutely fine. Do you have to go to a local court? Could you go to could you be like, right, the court on the Isle of Man is quite quiet. If I get a flight over there for the day, I'll go to the court of the Isle of Man. They'll have it done by Tuesday, and then we can move on. Does it have to be someone quite local?
Sadly, it's got to be your local court,
Ah,
which
damn
is
it.
generally your local county court. And in Cornwall, we only have one.
Oh,
So
right.
because we have one of everything, we've only got one hospital, one, but then we have beaches, you know.
And
Yeah,
dolphins, beaches and
and
dolphins.
we do have dolphins. So yeah, you know, yin and yang. You do have to take the rough with the smooth in Cornwall. Shit
Abs-
Wi-Fi, lovely beaches. So you know.
Absolutely. So, when do the elections open that people can vote for you as vice president for Propertymark? When do elections start?
So they open on the 6th of June, and they are open till the 27th of June, I believe, before the AGM. So you vote online, you visit a link that will be emailed to all members. Unfortunately, only members can vote, Chris. So I know that you're dying to vote in the elections, but you'll have to watch from the sidelines or just join. It'll be fine. And yes, and all you need is your membership number to be able to vote.
Why do I get the feeling that it's almost like it's going to be a Propertymark competition? Like who asked you to vote? Oh, Toby asked me to vote. Toby was like, yeah, but a vote came via me on the way to vote
That's
for
just
Sophie.
Toby trying to win a free captain's hat. Is you know he is a. But no, I mean the elections for this will be interesting. There's more candidates than there's ever been, which is good because it's showing that Propertymark is growing in people wanting to be involved at this level. Yeah, it should be interesting.
How many people are you up against? What's the
There's
tally?
5 of us going for Arla. I'm not sure about the estate agency side because until they actually open it, the only reason I know is because I just happen to know the people I was interviewing with, which is always a bonus. Yeah, so yeah, it'll be tough. We're all going to say we're passionate about the industry. We're all going to say the kind of lines, but I suppose it comes down to what the members want and who they want representing them because that's what's important. There is 18,000 Propertymark members. With 60 something percent of those being lettings, to be fair. So there's a lot of members. So they just need to use their vote. I actually, to the point of I don't, it's that okay. I don't mind who you vote for, just vote because your voice matters and you've got an opportunity to log in and vote.
I'm glad you said that because the number of interviews I've seen over the last couple of days or so where they're interviewing people on the street and saying, "Oh, the general election's coming, you're going to vote." They're like, "Oh no, it's all rubbish. I'm not going to vote anyway." And you're like, "That's literally what your vote is there for. Is to kind of change it from being rubbish."
I know, and I am of the opinion of if you didn't vote, you can't moan. I do think that you know you have to stand by what you want, and you know I think if you've been given a vote, that's quite an honor. Especially like if you look at I'm not talking about property mark votes as such. I'm talking about voting in general across the world. You know, lots of people fought for voting and risked a lot of things, and if you have one, use it. It is a voice. Use it.
Absolutely. Good. Excellent. Thank you so much for your time today. So I really appreciate coming on fairly short notice, chat us through why you make the perfect vice president. And if I could vote, you would have my vote, obviously. So
Thank you, Chris.
this is the
That's very
least I
nice of
could do.
you.
Thank you for coming on today. Really appreciate it. It's been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
More than welcome.